You clicked for the real Julius Caesar, the one they didn't teach you. And in the next few minutes, we're diving into the shocking, untold truths directly from ancient Rome's most scandalous biographer, Suetonius. Get ready, because history class got it wrong. Forget the sanitized textbooks. We're going straight to the source. The lives of the 12 Caesars. Imagine a Roman insider, a historian with access to imperial secrets, spilling all the tea on Caesar's ruthless ambition, his surprising vices, and the cutthroat politics that made and unmade him. This isn't just about battles and dates. It's about the man behind the myth. Did you know Caesar wasn't just a military genius, but also a fashionista obsessed with his appearance? Or that his clemency often masked a far more calculating strategy? We'll uncover how his seemingly generous acts were actually brilliant power plays, and reveal the personal habits that would shock even today's celebrities. No other account gives you this level of intimate, often gossipy, detail about a figure who literally changed the world. So, if you're ready to see the real Julius Caesar, the ambitious, flawed, and utterly fascinating figure, stick around. You're in for a treat. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment if you're excited for some juicy Roman history, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more untold stories from antiquity. The 12 Caesars. Gaius Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, later known as Julius Caesar the Divine, lost his father when he was just 16 years old. The following year, he was nominated as the high priest of Jupiter. At that time, he broke off his engagement to Caesarum, a wealthy woman from the equestrian class, whom he had been contracted to marry as a boy. Instead, he married Cornelia, the daughter of Cinna, a man who had been consul 4 times. Soon after, they had a daughter named Julia. Caesar resisted all attempts by the dictator Sulla to force him to divorce Cornelia. For this opposition, he was stripped of his priesthood, his wife's dowry, and his inherited property. Branded as part of the opposition faction, he was forced to flee Rome. Despite suffering from a recurring fever and constantly changing hiding places, he managed to secure his release by bribing the officers searching for him. Eventually, with the help of the Vestal Virgins and close relatives Mamercus Aemilius and Aurelius Cotta, he received a pardon. It is said that when Sulla finally yielded to pleas from his distinguished friends, he warned, "Your request is granted, and you may take him among you. But know this, the man you save today will one day bring ruin upon the nobility you defend. In Caesar you will find many a Marius." Caesar's first military campaign was in Asia, serving under the praetor M. Thermus. Sent to Bithynia to collect a fleet, he spent so much time at the court of King Nicomedes that rumors arose about an improper relationship. These rumors were fueled when Caesar quickly returned to Bithynia, claiming to recover a debt owed to a freedman client. Despite this, his service later enhanced his reputation. When the city of Mytilene was captured by storm, Thermus awarded him the civic crown for bravery. He also served briefly in Cilicia under Servilius Isauricus. But upon hearing of Sulla's death, Caesar quickly returned to Rome, wary of the unrest stirred by Marcus Lepidus. Distrusting Lepidus's leadership and sensing the unfavorable climate, he abandoned any alliance with him despite tempting offers. After the civil unrest settled, Caesar accused Cornelius Dolabella, a former consul with a triumph, of extortion. Following Dolabella's acquittal, Caesar left for Rhodes, seeking to escape public scorn and to study rhetoric under Apollonius, the son of Molon. On his journey, he was captured by pirates near the island of Pharmacusa and held captive for nearly 40 days, accompanied only by a physician and 2 attendants. While his friends raised ransom money, Caesar sent away others for safety. Once freed with a ransom of 50 talents, he returned with ships, captured the pirates, and punished them severely, as he had often joked he would. Shortly afterward, learning of Mithridates' raids nearby, he assisted Rome's Asian allies by gathering forces, driving out the king's governor, and holding wavering cities loyal. Elected as military tribune, Caesar helped restore the authority of the tribunes, diminished under Sulla's rule. He also sponsored the recall of his brother-in-law Lucius Cinna and others who had fled after supporting Lepidus, passionately advocating their return before the people. As quaestor, Caesar delivered funeral orations praising his Aunt Julia and his wife Cornelia. He traced his family's noble lineage, highlighting his aunt's descent from royal ancestors on her mother's side and from divine origins through Venus on her father's side. To replace Cornelia after her death, he married Pompeia, granddaughter of Lucius Sulla, but later divorced her amid scandal involving Publius Clodius. It was rumored Clodius had secretly infiltrated a religious festival disguised as a woman, leading to a Senate inquiry. Assigned further to Spain as quaestor, Caesar traveled the province on judicial duties. At Gades, he saw a statue of Alexander the Great and deeply sighed, feeling his own achievements paled by comparison at that same age. That night, he dreamed of lying with his mother, a vision interpreted as a sign he would one day rule the world, for the mother was seen as the earth itself. Leaving Spain early, he rallied the Latin colonies who sought Roman citizenship, preparing them for assertive action. Though delayed by consular troops, Caesar later made bolder moves within Rome. Just days before his aedileship, Caesar fell under suspicion of conspiring with Marcus Crassus and others to massacre senators and overthrow the government. The plan was for Crassus to become dictator and appoint Caesar his deputy. Sources confirm the plot but say Crassus did not show up on the assigned day, causing Caesar to withhold the signal to begin the attack. There are also accusations linking Caesar to another revolt planned with a young Piso, though this too failed. During his aedileship, Caesar improved the Comitium and Forum, erecting temporary structures to display his lavish collections for public entertainment. He held wild beast hunts and games, both alone and with his colleague Marcus Bibulus, who joked that Caesar had claimed all the credit. Caesar also staged gladiator fights but limited their number after opponents grew alarmed by his forces. By this time, Caesar sought to govern Egypt, exploiting unrest after the Alexandrian king had been expelled against the wishes of the Senate. The powerful nobility blocked this move, so Caesar struck back politically by restoring trophies honoring the victories of Caius Marius that had been destroyed by Sulla. In judgment of murderers, he condemned those who had collected rewards for killing Roman citizens, asserting they were assassins, punishable under the law. He further orchestrated an impeachment for treason against Caius Rabirius, recalling how Rabirius had helped suppress a previous sedition. Acting as judge, Caesar condemned Rabirius fiercely. When Rabirius appealed, Caesar's harshness was a key factor in his defense failing. Failing to gain Egypt, Caesar campaigned for the chief pontiff position, resorting to lavish bribery. Aware of the debts he had amassed, he told his mother on the day of the election, "I will not return home unless I am elected." He won decisively, defeating older and more established rivals by wide margins. As praetor during the conspiracy of Catiline, Caesar argued against executing the conspirators, proposing instead to exile them and confiscate their property. His stance troubled many senators, including Cicero. When violent opposition grew, even threatening him with swords, Caesar eventually gave way and withdrew from the Senate for the rest of the year to avoid further danger. On his first day as praetor, Caesar called for an accounting of the capital's repairs and proposed changes in office assignments. Facing strong resistance from the aristocracy, and seeing senators abandoning the new consuls, he dropped the plan. Supporting the tribune Caecilius Metellus against opposition, Caesar stood firm until the Senate dismissed both. Threatened by armed resistance, Caesar resigned his office and retreated home but managed to pacify a restless crowd that rose to defend his honor. This unexpected support led the Senate to restore him to office and praise his conduct. Yet suspicion lingered. He was named an accomplice of Catiline by informers and senators. He challenged these accusations, secured the backing of Cicero, and punished those who pressed false charges, including locking up the accusers for their misconduct. After his praetorship, Caesar again took charge of Spain. To satisfy creditors who tried to detain him, he posted sureties. Breaking with tradition, he hurried his departure, either to avoid impeachment or to aid allies in distress. Though he quickly restored peace there, he rushed back to Rome to seek a triumph and the consulship. With election day fixed, Caesar faced legal obstacles because he entered the city as a private citizen. Though he petitioned for special dispensation, fierce opposition forced him to abandon his triumph hopes to secure the consulship. Of the two other candidates for the consulship, Lucius Lysias and Marcus Bibulus, Caesar formed an alliance with Lysias. Though Lysias was less popular, he was wealthy and promised to fund their campaign together. The noble party, fearing what Caesar might achieve with a compliant colleague, pressured Bibulus to match the promises of Lysias. Many nobles contributed, and even Cato admitted that under these circumstances, bribery was for the public good. As a result, Caesar was elected consul alongside Bibulus. The dominant faction then assigned trivial provinces to the new consuls, like managing woods and roads. Outraged, Caesar sought the support of Gnaeus Pompey, who was dissatisfied with the Senate's delay in confirming his acts after victories over Mithridates. Caesar also brokered a reconciliation between Pompey and Marcus Crassus, who had been rivals since their joint consulship. The three agreed to jointly control government decisions, ensuring nothing would be done without their agreement. Once in office, Caesar introduced a rule that all daily acts of the Senate and people be recorded and published. He revived the tradition of being preceded by an officer and followed by lictors on alternate months when his fasces were not carried. When he proposed a bill for dividing some public land, Bibulus opposed him, only to be violently driven from the forum. Although Bibulus complained to the Senate, no one dared censure Caesar, who then managed affairs alone. So complete was Caesar's control that documents were signed in the consulship of Julius and Caesar, naming him twice. Popular verses circulated. Nothing was done in Bibulus's year. No. Caesar only then was consul here. Caesar divided land in Campania, allocating it favorably to over 20,000 free men with 3 or more children. He eased publicans by reducing their tax payments and warned them not to bid so recklessly next time. When Marcus Cato interrupted him in the Senate, Caesar had him dragged out by a lictor and imprisoned. Lucius Lucullus, who opposed him more forcefully, was so terrified he begged for mercy on his knees. On the same day Cicero lamented the crisis in Rome, Caesar moved to transfer his enemy, Publius Clodius, from patrician to plebeian status, a change long sought in vain. To intimidate opposition further, Caesar persuaded Vettius to claim he had been asked to assassinate Pompey. However, when this fell flat, Caesar is believed to have secretly poisoned Vettius. Around this time, Caesar married Calpurnia, daughter of Lucius Piso, Pompey's chosen successor for consul. He also gave his daughter Julia in marriage to Pompey, rejecting Servilius Scipio, whose influence had once helped him thwart Bibulus. After this alliance, Caesar began to seek Pompey's opinion on Senate matters first, a role previously given to Crassus. It became the norm for Caesar to consistently lead consultations with the Senate as of the new year. Supported now by his powerful family ties, Caesar selected Gaul as his province, hoping for military glory. Initially awarded Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum, he soon acquired the larger Gallia Comata province as well. Proud of his success, he boasted before the Senate that he had achieved all he desired despite his enemies, predicting he would make them bow to him. When a senator mockingly suggested that might be difficult for a woman, Caesar replied wittily that great queens like Semiramis and the Amazons once ruled vast parts of Asia. After his consulship ended, proposals were made to review the year's affairs, but Caesar offered to submit to the Senate's judgment. When they declined, he left for his province. Soon after, his quaestor was charged with misdemeanors aimed at implicating Caesar. An accusation followed from Lucius Antistus, a tribune, but Caesar appealed to the other tribunes to suspend prosecution during his service. He carefully ensured that candidates supported by him would pledge to defend him during his absence, sometimes requiring oaths or written agreements. When Lucius Domitius threatened that, if elected consul, he would strip Caesar of his army command, Caesar summoned Crassus and Pompey to Lucca in his province. He persuaded them to run again for consul and secure a 5-year extension of his command. Confident, he added to his legions at private expense, including one raised in Transalpine Gaul and named Alauda. He trained and equipped them in Roman fashion and granted them citizenship. From this point, Caesar seized every opportunity for war, attacking both Rome's allies and enemies without provocation. The Senate sent commissioners to investigate Gaul, and some proposed handing Caesar over to the enemy. Yet his victories earned him more honors and days of celebration than any commander before. In 9 years, Caesar conquered all of Gaul within natural boundaries: the Pyrenees, Alps, Cevenna Mountains, and the Rhine and Rhone rivers, covering around 3,200 miles. The only exceptions were allied nations or those favored by him. He imposed a vast annual tribute of 40 million sesterces. He was first among Romans to build a bridge across the Rhine and invade Germanic lands, winning several battles. He also crossed into Britain, a previously unknown land, and after defeating the Britons, demanded tribute and hostages. Despite these triumphs, Caesar faced 3 notable defeats: a storm that nearly destroyed his fleet in Britain, a loss at Gergovia where his legion was routed, and an ambush that killed his lieutenants in German territory. During this period, Caesar suffered personal losses. His mother, his daughter, and soon after, his granddaughter died. The Republic trembled after the murder of Publius Clodius, and the Senate decreed that only Pompey should serve as consul the following year. Caesar persuaded allied tribunes to propose a law letting him run for a second consulship while absent in Gaul, so he wouldn't have to quit his command early. With this secured, Caesar gained widespread favor through generous acts both public and private. Using war spoils, he began building a new forum, spending over 100 million sesterces. He promised the grandest gladiatorial games ever held, in memory of his daughter, and prepared lavish feasts. To maintain high standards, he ordered that unpopular gladiators be immediately removed and reserved for future events. He trained young gladiators not just in schools, but with Roman knights and senators skilled in arms, urging them to take charge of these novices. He doubled soldiers' pay permanently and allowed them plentiful grain. Sometimes, he even gifted each soldier a slave and land. To secure his alliance with Pompey, Caesar gave him his sister's granddaughter Octavia in marriage and sought Pompey's help in arranging a marriage for his own daughter to Fausta Sylla. He lent money at low or no interest to many, including senators, and gave generous gifts to visitors, freedmen, and favored slaves. He offered aid to those under prosecution or in debt, except those beyond help, whom he said only civil war could save. Caesar also worked to gain favor with princes and provinces worldwide, sending thousands of captives as gifts and dispatching troops on their request, without Senate approval. He built grand public buildings in the most powerful cities of Italy, Gaul, Spain, Greece, and Asia. But as people grew amazed and suspicions grew, Consul Claudius Marcellus declared a motion in the Senate to appoint a successor to Caesar before his term ended. He argued the war was over, peace restored, and the army should disband. Marcellus also moved that Caesar's absent candidacy for consul be blocked, noting that Pompey himself later repealed that privilege. Pompey had neglected to exclude Caesar from a law disqualifying absentee candidates, but corrected that mistake when the law was officially inscribed. Marcellus pressed further to revoke citizenship from colonists Caesar had settled at New Como under the Vatinian law, accusing Caesar of ambitious overreach. Furious, Caesar warned it would be harder to reduce him now from Rome's top citizen to a commoner than it had been earlier from noble to second class. He fought back through tribunes and the consul Servius Sulpicius. The next year, when Caius Marcellus pursued similar efforts, Caesar used a massive bribe to secure the support of consul Aemilius Paulus and tribunes Caius Curio and others. Facing entrenched opposition including consuls elect, he wrote to the Senate asking they not revoke his privileges or else require all generals to resign commands. He confidently believed he could more easily raise his veteran legions than Pompey could muster his new troops. He offered to disband most of his legions and relinquish Transalpine Gaul, keeping only a few troops until re-elected consul. When the Senate refused compromise and enemies refused negotiation, Caesar moved into Hither Gaul to administer justice and halted at Ravenna, prepared to use force against Senate measures targeting his supporters. This marked the start of civil war. Some say Caesar sought chaos because he felt his private wealth was insufficient to complete his grand plans, others that he feared prosecution for past actions. Marcus Cato vowed to impeach him if his army disbanded. Rumor suggested that, if he returned as a private citizen, he would need armed men for protection in court. Asinius Pollio recounts Caesar's words on the battlefield of Pharsalia, reflecting on his enemies' plans. After all my great achievements, I, Caius Caesar, must have been condemned if I had not summoned my army. It is believed Caesar's long ambition and calculation of strength led him to seize supreme power. Cicero noted Caesar often quoted Euripides. Be just, unless a kingdom tempts to break the laws, for sovereign power alone can justify the cause. When news arrived that the tribunes supporting Caesar had fled Rome, he discreetly sent forward cohorts to avoid suspicion. Maintaining appearances, he attended public events and dined with friends. After sunset, with mules hitched to his carriage, he departed quietly with a small group. Lost in the dark, he wandered until a guide helped him find the road at dawn. Approaching the Rubicon, the boundary of his province, Caesar paused, contemplating the gravity of crossing. Turning to his men, he said, "We may still retreat, but if we cross this small bridge, we must fight it out." At that moment, a noble-looking man playing a pipe appeared, drawing shepherds, soldiers, and trumpeters to listen. Seizing a trumpet, Caesar sounded the advance, crossing to the other side. He declared, "Let us follow the omens of the gods and the injustice of our enemies. The die is cast." Of the two other candidates for the consulship, Lucius Lysias and Marcus Bibulus, Caesar allied with Lysias, a wealthy man though less popular, on condition that Lysias would promise money to the electors in their joint names. Fearing Caesar's potential influence with a cooperative colleague, the nobles urged Bibulus to match the promises, with many contributing, including Cato, who admitted that bribery was justified for the public good under those circumstances. Consequently, Caesar and Bibulus were elected consuls. The ruling party then assigned them insignificant provinces, like oversight of woods and roads. Insulted, Caesar worked to win over Gnaeus Pompey, who was displeased with the Senate's delays in confirming his actions after victories over Mithridates. Caesar also reconciled Pompey and Marcus Crassus, who had been rivals since their consulship, and agreed with both that no government business would proceed without their joint consent. After taking office, Caesar mandated that daily acts of the Senate and people be recorded and published. He revived the custom of being preceded by an officer and followed by lictors on alternating months. When he proposed dividing some public lands, Bibulus opposed him but was violently expelled from the forum. Though Bibulus made a complaint to the Senate, no one dared censure Caesar, who then managed public affairs alone. So complete was Caesar's control that documents were signed in the consulship of Julius and Caesar, naming him twice. Popular verses circulated. Nothing was done in Bibulus's year. No. Caesar only then was consul here. Caesar divided lands in Campania among over 20,000 free men with multiple children. He reduced the taxes publicans owed and warned against overbidding. When Marcus Cato interrupted him in the Senate, Caesar had him dragged out and imprisoned. Lucius Lucullus, opposing more fiercely, was terrified into submission. On the same day Cicero lamented the times, Caesar transferred his enemy Publius Clodius from patrician to plebeian status, a move long sought in vain. To intimidate opponents further, Caesar induced Vettius to claim he'd been asked to assassinate Pompey. When this failed, Caesar is believed to have secretly poisoned Vettius. Around this time, Caesar married Calpurnia, daughter of Lucius Piso, Pompey's consul successor, and gave his daughter Julia in marriage to Pompey, rejecting a previous suitor. Henceforth, Caesar sought Pompey's opinion first in Senate debates, a shift from his earlier deference to Crassus. Now backed by family ties, Caesar chose Gaul as his province, seeking military glory. Initially given Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum, he soon won Gallia Comata too. Proud, he boasted in the Senate of having secured all he desired despite enemies, quipping that great females like Semiramis had ruled vast regions. After consulship ended, proposals to review the year's acts failed and Caesar left for Gaul. His quaestor faced charges intended to implicate him, but Caesar successfully suspended prosecutions during his service. He ensured election candidates pledged to defend him, sometimes requiring oaths or written guarantees. When Lucius Domitius threatened to strip Caesar of his command if elected consul, Caesar summoned Crassus and Pompey to Lucca, persuading them to seek consulship again and support extending his command 5 more years. Confident, he raised more legions at private expense, including one from Transalpine Gaul named Alauda, trained in Roman style and granted citizenship. From then, Caesar seized every chance for war, attacking Rome's allies and enemies without cause. The Senate sent commissioners to investigate Gaul and some proposed handing Caesar to the enemy. Yet, his victories earned more honors and supplications than any commander before. In 9 years, Caesar conquered all Gaul within natural borders, imposing a massive tribute. He first crossed the Rhine by bridge, defeating Germanic tribes beyond. He also invaded Britain, unknown before, exacting tribute and hostages. Amid triumphs, he suffered 3 notable defeats, in Britain, at Gergovia, and in a German ambush. During this time, Caesar lost his mother, daughter, and granddaughter. After the murder of Clodius, the Senate decreed only Pompey should be consul next year. Caesar persuaded tribunes to propose a law letting him run for consul while absent in Gaul, avoiding early command loss. Securing this, he gained favor by acts of generosity, spending vast sums building a new forum and promising the grandest gladiator games in memory of his daughter. He set strict rules to maintain order in the games and personally trained gladiators with Roman knights and senators' help. He doubled soldiers' pay and often gifted slaves and land. To reinforce his alliance with Pompey, Caesar gave him his sister's granddaughter Octavia and requested Pompey's aid for his daughter's marriage. He lent money widely and gave generously to visitors, freedmen, and favored slaves. He aided those prosecuted or in debt, except those beyond hope, whom he said only civil war could save. Caesar courted princes and provinces globally, gifting captives and troops without Senate approval, and building magnificent public structures in key cities. Concerned, Consul Claudius Marcellus moved in the Senate to appoint a successor to Caesar and argued the army should disband as peace returned. He sought to block Caesar's absentee candidacy, a privilege Pompey had later revoked due to a legal oversight. Marcellus also moved to revoke citizenship from colonists Caesar had settled, accusing him of ambition. Enraged, Caesar warned lowering him from Rome's top citizen to a commoner was harder now. He fought back through tribunes and the consul Servius Sulpicius. The next year, when Marcellus renewed efforts, Caesar secured support by massive bribes from influential figures like Consul Aemilius Paulus and Tribune Caius Curio. Facing immovable opposition, he petitioned the Senate not to revoke his rights or require all generals to resign commands. Confident, he believed he could rally his veteran legions more easily than Pompey could his new troops. He offered to disband most legions and relinquish Transalpine Gaul, keeping a small force until re-election. Rejected, Caesar moved into Hither Gaul to administer justice and prepared to use force against Senate measures against his supporters. This started civil war. Some say Caesar sought chaos because private wealth could not complete his grand plans, others that he feared prosecution. Marcus Cato vowed impeachment upon army disbandment. Rumors said Caesar would need armed protection in court if a private citizen. Asinius Pollio records Caesar's words at Pharsalia. After all my great achievements, I, Caius Caesar, must have been condemned if I had not summoned my army. Believed driven by ambition and strength assessment, Caesar seized supreme power. Cicero quotes him translating Euripides. Be just unless a kingdom tempts to break the laws, for sovereign power alone can justify the cause. When tribunes supporting Caesar fled Rome, he discreetly sent cohorts ahead. Maintaining appearances, he attended public events. After sunset, with a small party, he departed silently. Lost, he wandered until dawn and found a guide. At the Rubicon, boundary of his province, he paused, then told his companions, "We may still retreat, but if we cross this small bridge, we must fight." Nearby, a nobleman playing pipes drew shepherds and soldiers. Seizing a trumpet, Caesar sounded the advance and crossed. He declared, "Let us follow the omens of the gods and the injustice of our enemies. The die is cast." Having crossed the Rubicon with his army, Caesar showed his troops the tribunes of the people who, driven from the city, had come to meet him. Before this gathered assembly, with tears in his eyes and his garment torn open at the chest, he called on the soldiers to pledge their loyalty. There is a story that Caesar promised each soldier a knight's estate, but this is a misunderstanding. He often held up a finger on his left hand, declaring that to reward those who defended his honor, he was willing even to give his ring. Soldiers, watching from a distance, misinterpreted the gesture, believing he promised each the right to wear a gold ring and to receive a large estate. Afterwards, Caesar took control of Picenum, Umbria, and Etruria. He forced Lucius Domitius, his would-be successor who held the town of Corsinium with a garrison, to surrender and then dismissed him. Marching along the Adriatic coast, he pursued the consuls and Pompey, who had fled to Brundusium intending to cross the sea. Despite Caesar's efforts to block their escape, they succeeded. Caesar then appealed to the Senate about the state of affairs and set out for Spain. Pompey commanded a large army there through 3 lieutenants, Marcus Petreius, Lucius Afranius, and Marcus Varro. Before leaving, Caesar told his friends, "I go against an army without a general and shall return against a general without an army." Though delayed by the siege of Marseilles and a severe grain shortage, he soon overwhelmed his opponents. Returning to Rome, Caesar crossed to Macedonia, where he besieged Pompey for almost 4 months behind vast ramparts. Finally, he defeated Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalia. Pursuing Pompey to Alexandria, Caesar learned of his murder and shortly found himself embroiled in a dangerous war against King Ptolemy, who plotted treacherously against him. Though trapped within hostile walls during winter, with no supplies and facing a cunning enemy, Caesar prevailed. He placed Egypt under Cleopatra and her younger brother without turning it into a Roman province, fearing an ambitious prefect there might spark rebellion. From Alexandria, Caesar moved to Syria and then Pontus, responding to news about Pharnaces, son of the famous Mithridates. Pharnaces had taken advantage of the chaotic times to wage war on neighbors, growing more arrogant with each success. Yet, within 5 days of entering his kingdom, and only 4 hours after first seeing him, Caesar decisively defeated Pharnaces. He remarked to his followers how fortunate Pompey was to gain fame by beating such a weak enemy. Caesar soon defeated Scipio and Juba, who rallied forces in Africa, and Pompeian sons in Spain. Throughout the civil war, Caesar never suffered personal defeat, only his lieutenants did. Caius Curio died in Africa. Caius Antonius was captured in Illyricum. Publius Dolabella lost a fleet there, and Gnaeus Domitius Corvinus lost an army in Pontus. In every engagement Caesar led, he triumphed without serious doubt except twice. Once at Dyrrhachium, where he was forced to retreat but Pompey failed to press his advantage, and once in his final battle in Spain, where despair nearly drove him to suicide. For his military successes, Caesar celebrated 5 triumphs. After defeating Scipio, 4 triumphs came in quick succession, each a few days apart, and one more after overcoming Pompey's sons. His first and most splendid triumph honored his victories in Gaul. Another celebrated Alexandria. Others commemorated Pontus, Africa, and Spain. Each triumph boasted unique splendor. At the Gallic triumph, as Caesar rode the Velabrum Street, his chariot's axle broke, nearly causing a fall. He then climbed the Capitol by torchlight, accompanied by 40 elephants bearing torches. The Pontic triumph featured a tablet inscribed with the famous motto, "I came, I saw, I conquered," a testament not just to what was done, but the swiftness of his victories. To his veteran soldiers, Caesar gave generous rewards. Besides the 2,000 sesterces paid at the war's start, he awarded an additional 20,000 in prize money. He granted them land, but scattered so as not to dispossess former owners entirely. To the Roman people, besides generous grain and oil distributions, he gave 300 sesterces apiece, plus another 100 for delayed payment. He also forgave a year's rent for houses with moderate taxes in Rome and across Italy. Caesar organized public entertainment lavishly. He held gladiatorial combats and plays performed in various city wards and languages. He staged Circensian games, wrestling matches, and even a sea fight reenactment. In the Forum Gladiator fight, notable individuals like Furius Leptinus, a man of Praetorian rank, and Quintus Calpenus, a former senator, took to the arena. The Pyrrhic dance was performed by youths from noble Asian and Bithynian families. Decimus Liberius, formerly a Roman knight, acted in his own play, receiving 500,000 sesterces and a gold ring on stage before returning to his equestrian seat. Circensian games involved chariot races, some drawn by 4 horses, others by 2, and horse races by young nobles. The Trojan War was enacted by 2 groups of boys distinguished by age and rank. A 5-day wild beast hunt culminated in a massive battle featuring 500 infantry, 20 elephants, and 30 horsemen on each side, fought between 2 camps pitched where the goals had been removed. Wrestling matches followed for 3 days in a stadium specially built in the Campus Martius. A lake was dug for the sea fight reenactment, featuring Tyrian and Egyptian ships manned by oarsmen rowing in 2, 3, and 4 banks. The spectacle drew so many spectators from afar that many lodged in tents along city streets and nearby roads. Sadly, in the crush, some were suffocated, including 2 senators. Turning to civic matters, Caesar reformed the calendar, which had become grossly confusing due to excessive intercalations by pontiffs. Festivals once attuned to harvests and vintages no longer matched the seasons. He aligned the year with the solar cycle, setting it to 365 days without intercalary months, adding a leap day every 4th year. To start the year regularly on January 1st, he inserted 2 extra months between November and December, making the year of reform 15 months long. He filled Senate vacancies by promoting plebeians to patrician rank and increased the number of praetors, aediles, quaestors, and lower magistrates. He restored censured senators and allowed sons of proscribed men to hold office. Magistracies were split evenly between his nominees and popular choice, with Caesar recommending candidates via bills circulated through tribes. He settled 80,000 citizens in colonies abroad and passed laws to stem depopulation. No citizen between 20 and 40, not in military service, could be absent from Italy for more than 3 years. Senators' sons could not go abroad unless in superior officers' retinues. Shepherds had to ensure at least a third were freeborn youths. Physicians and liberal arts teachers were granted citizenship to encourage them to stay in Rome. Regarding debts, Caesar disappointed hopes for full cancellation. Debtors had to repay at pre-war property valuations, subtracting interest already paid, erasing about 1/4 of debt. He dissolved all guilds except ancient ones and increased penalties. Because the rich committed crimes expecting only exile, Caesar insisted on stripping murderers of their estates and other criminals of half their property. Caesar was diligent and strict in justice. He expelled bribery-convicted senators and annulled a questionable marriage without evidence of impropriety. He taxed imported goods strictly. Use of litters, purple robes, and jewelry was limited by age, rank, and occasion. Sumptuary laws were rigorously enforced, with officers seizing illegal meats from markets and even restaurants, sometimes sending lictors and soldiers to confiscate food already on tables. His mind focused daily on grand projects to beautify Rome and extend the empire. He planned a temple to Mars to surpass all others worldwide, intending to fill the lake used for his sea fight spectacle for construction. He projected a vast theater near the Tarpeian Mount and aimed to codify civil law, extracting the best from the vast unruly statutes into a few volumes. He tasked Marcus Varro with collecting Greek and Latin works for public libraries. He planned major engineering feats, draining the Pomptine marshes, cutting a channel to drain Lake Fucinus, building a road from the Adriatic through the Apennines to the Tiber, excavating a canal through the Isthmus of Corinth, subduing Dacians who overran Pontus and Thrace, and eventually campaigning against the Parthians via Lesser Armenia, though he planned no major battle without prior tests of their strength. Yet, death claimed him before these ambitions were fulfilled. Describing his appearance, Caesar was tall, fair-skinned, with a round build and full face. His eyes were black and piercing. He enjoyed excellent health until late life, when he suffered fainting spells and restless sleep. Twice he experienced epileptic seizures during active service. He was meticulous about his appearance, keeping his hair closely cropped and face clean-shaven. He even plucked hair from other body parts, a habit mocked by some. Baldness troubled him, especially as enemies mocked him for it. He tried to conceal it by combing hair forward from the crown. Among all honors, he prized most the right to wear a laurel crown constantly. His clothing was distinctive. He wore the latus clavis, marked by fringed wrists, girded loosely, prompting Sulla's warning to beware the ill-girt boy. Initially, Caesar lived in a modest house in the Suburra. After becoming pontiff, he occupied a state-owned palace on the Via Sacra. Many accounts say he favored elegance and grand entertainment. He reportedly demolished a costly villa near Aricia that he had painstakingly built because it did not suit his taste, despite debts. On campaigns, he is said to have transported mosaic and marble floor tiles for his tent. Reports also say he invaded Britain hoping to find pearls, which he weighed and compared by hand. He sought to acquire expensive gems, carvings, statues, and paintings by great masters. He paid such high prices for young, skilled slaves that he forbade recording those sums in his expense accounts. In the provinces, Caesar maintained 2 dining tables, one for the army officers and local gentry, and another for the highest-ranking Romans and distinguished provincials. He was meticulous about managing his household affairs, both large and small. For instance, he once imprisoned a baker for serving him finer bread than his guests received. He even executed a favored freedman for seducing the wife of a Roman knight, despite no complaints being brought to Caesar himself. The only blemish on his reputation for chastity was his association with King Nicomedes of Bithynia, a stain he carried all his life and which subjected him to bitter ridicule. Well-known poets like Calvus Licinius wrote verses mocking him, and orators such as Dolabella and Curio called him the queen's rival and the brothel of Nicomedes. Bibulus even branded him the queen of Bithynia, joking that Caesar once loved a king but now desired a kingdom. Such jabs were widely echoed. A man named Octavius, known for his wild humor, referred to Pompey as king and Caesar as queen at a crowded assembly. Caius Memmius accused Caesar of serving the king alongside other favorites in front of visiting Roman merchants. Cicero, while defending Caesar's plea for Nyssa, daughter of Nicomedes, to the Senate, subtly acknowledged the rumors by stating, "We know well what he gave you, and you gave him." During Caesar's Gallic triumph, soldiers sang satirical verses. The Gauls to Caesar yield, Caesar to Nicomedes. Behold, Caesar triumphs for his noble deed, but Caesar's conqueror gains no victor's meed. Caesar's indulgence with women was notorious. He was both expensive and widely unfaithful, seducing many high-born ladies, including Postumia, wife of Servius Sulpicius, Lollia, wife of Aulus Gabinius, Tertulla, Marcus Crassus's wife, and Mucia, Gnaeus Pompey's wife. Critics mocked Pompey for marrying Caesar's daughter Julia to him, while divorcing his own wife after having 3 children with her, calling Pompey Aegisthus. Caesar's greatest love, however, was Servilia, mother of Marcus Brutus. During their affair, Caesar purchased a pearl for her worth 6 million sesterces and, during the Civil War, acquired valuable farms for her at auctions. Cicero wittily noted that the price was low because tertia was deducted, referring to Servilia's daughter allegedly prostituted to Caesar. Caesar's affairs extended to married Roman women in the provinces, as the popular jest at his Gallic triumph implied. "Watch well your wives, ye citizens, we bring a blade, a bald pate master of the wenching trade. Thy gold was spent on many a Gallic W.E. Exhausted now, thou comest to borrow more." Among his mistresses were queens. Juno, the Moorish wife of Bogoods, received lavish gifts alongside her husband. But Caesar's greatest favorite was Cleopatra, with whom he would revel through the night and sail luxuriously toward Ethiopia, if not for his army's refusal to follow. He later summoned her to Rome, showered her with honors and gifts, and allowed her to name a son after him. Some Greek historians say this child resembled Caesar visibly and in manner. Mark Antony declared in the Senate that Caesar acknowledged the child as his own, a truth known to Caesar's close friends. Appius published a book to deny this paternity, while Helvius Cinna, tribune of the people, revealed that Caesar had a bill drafted to permit him to marry any number of wives and leave children. Curio the Elder summed up Caesar's scandalous reputation. He was every woman's man and every man's woman. Even Caesar's enemies agreed that he was abstemious in wine. Marcus Cato remarked that Caesar was the only sober man among those intent on overthrowing the government. In diet, Caesar was indifferent, as Caius Appius recounts. When served stale oil that others rejected, Caesar ate heartily so as not to offend his host. However, this self-restraint did not extend to finances. Writers report he accepted money from his predecessor and Roman allies in Spain to clear debts. He plundered Lusitanian towns without resistance, rifled chapels and temples in Gaul filled with riches, and destroyed cities more for loot than offenses. Gold was so abundant with him that he exchanged it in Italy and the provinces at exorbitant rates. In his first consulship, Caesar stole 3,000 pounds of gold from the capital, replacing it with gilt brass. He bargained with foreign kings for gold in exchange for titles and extracted nearly 6,000 talents from Ptolemy alone. His wars, triumphs, and spectacles were funded by blatant theft and sacrilege. Caesar rivaled the greatest men in eloquence and military skill. After prosecuting Dolabella, he became known as a leading advocate. Cicero told Brutus that Caesar was no inferior to any great orator, praising his elegant, noble style. In letters to Cornelius Nepos, Cicero questioned whom one could prefer over Caesar, who was precise, polished, and forceful. As a young man, Caesar emulated Strabo Caesar, even borrowing passages from his speeches. His speaking voice was high-pitched, with lively yet graceful gestures. Some speeches preserved under his name, such as those for Quintus Metellus, or to his soldiers in Spain, are likely misattributed, products of stenographers unable to keep pace. Caesar authored commentaries on the Gallic and Civil Wars, though the authorship of works on the Alexandrian, African, and Spanish campaigns is uncertain, with some attributing them to Oppius or Hirtius. Cicero praised Caesar's commentaries as plain, precise, and elegant, but warned that while they encouraged foolish imitators, they discouraged wise historians from attempting the subject. Hirtius added that these works were so acclaimed they precluded future historians. Yet, Asinius Pollio thought Caesar rushed his accounts and sometimes lacked critical judgment, suggesting he planned a corrected edition. Caesar also wrote treatises titled Analogy and Anticato, and a poem named The Itinerary. He composed the first during his return across the Alps, the second near the Battle of Munda, and the poem on a journey from Rome to farther Spain. Letters from Caesar to the Senate survive, uniquely formatted like memorandum books rather than continuous text, along with correspondence to Cicero and others. When secrecy was needed, he used ciphers substituting letters by shifts of 4 places. Some juvenile works attributed to him, an encomium to Hercules, the tragedy Oedipus, and collections of sayings, were banned from publication by Augustus. Caesar excelled in arms, horseback riding, and endurance. On marches, he led bareheaded, often on foot, through all weather. He traveled swiftly in a light carriage without baggage, covering up to 100 miles a day. When obstructed by flooded rivers, he swam or crossed on inflated skins, often arriving ahead of his army. His expeditions combined caution and boldness. He never marched where ambushes were possible without first scouting. Before invading Britain, he personally surveyed navigation, harbors, and landing sites. When his camp in Germany was besieged, he disguised himself in Gaulish dress to reach his troops. In winter, he crossed enemy fleets between Brundisium and Dyrrhachium. Frustrated by tardy reinforcements, Caesar once traveled alone at night, head covered, making no effort to alert others despite rough seas. Caesar was fearless and relentless. When a sacrificial victim escaped, he did not delay his campaign against Scipio and Juba. After stepping ashore and stumbling, he proclaimed, "I hold you fast, Africa," turning omen to his favor. Defying popular prophecies that the Scipios were unbeatable in Africa, he kept in his camp a notorious scoundrel named Cilicio, mocking the family's reputation. He fought pitched battles and swift surprise attacks, sometimes during violent storms when no one expected action. He fought vigorously until late in life when he grew more cautious, valuing victories without needless risks. He never let enemies escape their camps to regroup, and if battle was uncertain, sent away horses first so soldiers had no route to flee. His horse was remarkable. Its hooves split like toes. He bred and broke it himself. Only he could ride it. Soothsayers regarded this as an omen of world mastery. A statue of the horse was erected by Caesar's order before the temple of Venus Genetrix. Caesar personally rallied fleeing troops, grabbing them by the throat to face the enemy. On one occasion, an eagle-bearer tried to spear him. Another left his standard in Caesar's hands. After Pharsalia, while crossing the Hellespont, Caesar encountered Lucius Cassius of the opposition with 10 warships. Rather than flee, he hailed Cassius to surrender, which Cassius humbly did. At Alexandria, during a bridge attack, Caesar was forced into a boat with others. He leapt into the sea and swam 200 paces to another ship, holding his left hand above water to protect papers and biting his cloak to keep it from falling into enemy hands. He judged soldiers not by morals or wealth but only by bravery, applying a balance of strictness and leniency. He relaxed discipline when far from the enemy but was a strict disciplinarian in battle and marched without warning to keep troops ready. He often drew them out without cause, especially in rain or on holy days, tiring them with unexpected long marches while he led ahead unseen. When his troops grew fearful upon hearing of the enemy's great strength, Caesar did not deny or minimize the facts, Instead, he magnified them to rally their courage. Once, as they anxiously awaited King Juba, he gathered them and said, "In just a few days, the king will arrive with 10 legions, 30,000 cavalry, 100,000 light infantry, and 300 elephants. Let no one ask further questions or make wild guesses. Believe me, as my intelligence is certain. Otherwise, I will load the doubters on an old, broken ship and cast them to the mercy of the winds, sending them far away." Caesar was lenient with many transgressions but punished deserters and mutineers severely. After victorious battles, he sometimes granted his soldiers rest and revelry, boasting that well-oiled soldiers fought better. He addressed them as fellow soldiers, not simply soldiers, and kept their arms finely adorned with silver and gold, not just for show, but to inspire pride and fear of loss in battle. His affection for his troops was deep. Hearing of a defeat under Titurius, Caesar neither cut his hair nor shaved his beard until he had avenged the loss. This devotion won his soldiers' loyalty and heightened their valor. At the start of the Civil War, every centurion offered to pay for a cavalryman, and the entire army agreed to fight without pay or grain, with wealthier soldiers supporting the poor. Throughout the war, no soldier deserted. Many captured refused freedom on the condition they fight against Caesar. They endured harsh scarcity, even when sieging others. At Dyrrhachium, Pompey, blocked in his camp, saw the enemy eating herb bread and called them wild beasts, forbidding its display lest his men's morale break. Their bravery was unmatched. After setbacks at Dyrrhachium, the soldiers demanded punishment themselves, forcing Caesar to comfort rather than discipline them. Elsewhere, smaller forces triumphed over massive enemy armies. Notably, one cohort of the 6th Legion held a fort for hours against 4 legions of Pompey's, with nearly every man wounded by 130,000 arrows found inside the walls. Such courage was embodied by men like Cassius Sceva, a centurion who, despite losing an eye, being pierced in the thigh and shoulder, and having his shield riddled with holes, staunchly defended the fort's gate. Another soldier, Gaius Julius, lost his right hand in a naval fight at Marseilles but seized an enemy ship with his remaining hand, echoing the famed Greek hero Cynegeirus. The soldiers never mutinied during the 10 years of the Gallic War and only briefly showed unrest during the Civil War, quickly returning to obedience, not from indulgence but from respect for Caesar's command. He never conceded to insubordinate demands and disbanded the rebellious 9th Legion with disgrace at Placentia. Even Pompey refused to accept them until they humbled themselves and punished ringleaders. When the 10th Legion at Rome threatened mutiny demanding discharge and rewards during the African War, Caesar defied his friends' advice and disbanded them. Addressing them as Quirites instead of soldiers, he won them back immediately. Though refusing their service, he fined the worst mutineers by withholding parts of their plunder and land allocations. In his youth, Caesar zealously represented clients. He fiercely defended a noble youth, Macintha, against King Hiempsal. During a scuffle, Caesar grabbed the beard of Juba's son. After Macintha was declared tributary, Caesar rescued him by force, sheltered him, and upon leaving for Spain took him with him in his official litter, escorted by lictors. He treated friends generously. When Caius Oppius fell ill in a forest, Caesar gave him the only available shelter, choosing to sleep outside. Rising to power, he elevated loyal followers of humble birth to high office, saying publicly, "Had robbers and cutthroats supported me, I would have rewarded them the same." Caesar was quick to forgive enemies. Though Caius Memmius had fiercely attacked him, Caesar later backed him in a consulship bid. When C. Calvus released scandalous verses, Caesar initiated reconciliation. Valerius Catullus wrote stinging poems casting lasting shame on Caesar's friend Mamurra. Caesar pardoned Catullus, invited him to supper, and continued lodging with his father. His temperament was naturally averse to harshness. After capturing pirates who held him hostage, he fulfilled his vow to crucify them, but only after first beheading them. He spared Cornelius Fagitas, despite Fagitas's plan to betray him to Sulla, choosing not to harm him. He executed Philemon, his amanuensis turned traitor, but without torture. When summoned to testify against Publius Clodius, implicated in profaning religious rites, Caesar claimed ignorance, despite his mother and sister's detailed testimony. Asked why he divorced his wife Pompeia, he replied, "My family must be free not only of guilt but suspicion as well." In both governing and dealing with defeated foes, Caesar showed remarkable moderation. While Pompey declared enemies would be those who took no arms for the Republic, Caesar considered neutrals his friends. He allowed commanders on Pompey's recommendation to defect freely to him. After a failed surrender negotiation at Illyria, where Afranius and Petreius slaughtered Caesar's men in camp, he refused to repay such treachery. At Pharsalia, Caesar urged his soldiers to spare fellow Romans and permitted them to save enemies. Few lost their lives except in battle, except Afranius, Faustus, and young Lucius Caesar, likely executed without Caesar's consent. Afranius and Faustus fought against him despite prior pardons. Lucius Caesar destroyed Caesar's freedmen, slaves, and the beasts prepared for games. Shortly before his death, Caesar allowed pardoned enemies to return to Italy and hold office. He restored statues of Sulla and Pompey toppled by crowds, choosing to check rather than punish dissent. When conspiracies surfaced, he posted proclamations warning he knew of them. Critics were publicly cautioned but not punished. He endured libelous attacks by Aulus Caecina and lampoons by Pythalas with notable moderation. Despite these qualities, Caesar's abuses of power were stark. He claimed the consulship annually, held dictatorship for life, the censorship, title of emperor, and was named father of the country. His statue stood among kings. He occupied a regal couch in the theater. He accepted honors unbefitting mortals. Gilded chairs in the Senate, consecrated chariots, banners in circus processions, temples, altars, and statues among gods, beds of state, priests and priestly colleges dedicated to himself, and a month named for him. In his third and fourth consulships, he used only the title, content with dictatorship's power. In both years, he substituted consuls for 3 months, holding no elections except for tribunes and aediles. He appointed praetorian officers, or prefects, to govern the city during his absence. When one consul died suddenly on January 1st, Caesar granted the office briefly to a petitioner. He also appointed magistrates for multi-year terms, gave consular insignia to 10 former praetors, admitted freedmen and even Gaulish semi-barbarians to the Senate. He entrusted minting and public treasury management to household servants and gave command of 3 legions at Alexandria to an old freedman's son. His arrogance soared. As Titus Ampius reports, Caesar said, "The Republic is but a name without substance. Sulla was foolish to abdicate dictatorship. Men must mind their speech with me and treat my words as law." When a soothsayer reported bad omens, no heart in a sacrificial victim, Caesar retorted that the entrails would be favorable when he wished and that a beast lacking a heart was no marvel. Caesar's greatest offense was to receive the Senate seated before the temple of Venus Genetrix while granting him highest honors. When attempting to stand, Cornelius Balbus held him down, or he simply refused, frowning on Caius Trebatius who suggested he rise. This insult shocked Rome, especially as Caesar angrily demanded tribune Pontius Aquila be removed for refusing to stand for him during his triumph. For days thereafter, Caesar promised favors only if Pontius Aquila allows it. Another outrage followed after the Latin festival when a man crowned Caesar's statue with a laurel wreath and white fillet. Tribunes Epidius Marullus and Ctesius Flavius removed the fillet and imprisoned the man. Caesar harshly reprimanded and dismissed the tribunes. From then, the stigma of aspiring kingship haunted him, despite his protests. "I am Caesar, not king." At the Lupercalia festival, when Consul Antony placed a crown on his head several times, Caesar removed it and sent it to Jupiter's temple. Rumors spread that Caesar planned to withdraw to Alexandria or Ilium to shift power, drain Italy with levies, and leave governance to friends. It was added that Lucius Cotta would move the Senate to crown Caesar king, citing Sibylline prophecies. To prevent this, conspirators rushed their plot. Public and private dissatisfaction with tyranny grew, urging patriots to act. A handbill mockingly advised no one to show new senators the Senate House, while popular verses said, "The Gauls he dragged in triumph through the town, Caesar has brought into the Senate House, and changed their plaids for the patrician gown." When Quintus Maximus, Caesar's deputy for 3 months, entered the theater, the crowd shouted, "He is no consul." After Marullus and Flavius's removal, they gained many votes in the next consular elections. Someone scrawled under Lucius Brutus's statue, "Would you were alive now," and under Caesar's. Because he drove from Rome the royal race, Brutus was first made consul in their place. This man, because he put the consuls down, has been rewarded with a royal crown. About 60 conspired against Caesar, led by Caius Cassius and Marcus and Decimus Brutus. They debated killing him during the Campus Martius voting or ambushing him on the Via Sacra or theater entrance. Finally, after a public Senate meeting was proclaimed for the Ides of March in Pompey's Senate House, they chose this time and place for their act. Caesar received unmistakable warnings of his fate. Months earlier, when colonists settled at Capua under the Julian law, they demolished ancient tombs to build country houses. Among the artifacts discovered was a brass tablet buried with Capus, Capua's founder, inscribed in Greek. Whenever the bones of Capus are found, a descendant of Iulus will be slain by kinsmen, his death followed by dreadful disasters across Italy. This story was widely circulated on the authority of Caius Balbus, a close friend of Caesar. Days before his death, Caesar was told the horses he had released to graze after crossing the Rubicon refused to eat and wept profusely. The soothsayer Spurina, observing ominous signs in a sacrifice, warned him of danger before the Ides of March. The night before, birds from a nearby grove chased a wren carrying a laurel sprig into Pompey's Senate House, tearing it apart. Caesar dreamt twice that night, first soaring above the clouds, then shaking hands with Jupiter. His wife Calpurnia dreamt the house's pediment fell and that Caesar was stabbed on her chest. The chamber doors then suddenly slammed open. Due to these omens and his failing health, Caesar hesitated to attend the Senate, where he planned to propose important business. But Decimus Brutus urged him to go, reminding him the senators awaited. Caesar left around the 5th hour. En route, someone slipped him a warning about the plot, which he concealed among other papers to read later. Despite unfavorable omens before the Ides, Caesar laughed at Spurina, who cautioned, "The Ides have come but not passed." Upon sitting, conspirators circled him under the guise of courtesy. Tullius Cimber, who planned to start the attack, stepped close as if to speak. Caesar signaled to delay but was seized by the toga, crying violence. He was stabbed below the throat by one of the Cassii. He grasped the assailant's arm and stabbed him with his stylus but was halted by wounds from others. Finding himself surrounded, Caesar wrapped his toga over his head and pulled its skirt over his legs to fall with modesty. He received 23 stab wounds, uttering only a groan at the first. Some say that when Brutus struck, Caesar said, "You too, my son?" The Senate chamber emptied instantly. Caesar's body lay for some time until 3 slaves carried it home, one arm dangling. Surgeon Antistius judged only the second wound, through the breast, fatal. The conspirators planned to throw his body into the Tiber, confiscate his estate, and repeal his laws. But fearing Mark Antony and Lepidus, Caesar's master of horse, they abandoned these plans. At Lucius Piso's urging, Caesar's will was read at Mark Antony's house. Made months earlier, the will named 3 heirs, his sister's grandsons. Caius Octavius receiving 3/4, and Lucius Pinarius and Quintus Pedius sharing the rest. He adopted Octavius, who took his name, and included many conspirators as guardians of any son he might have. Caesar bequeathed his gardens near the Tiber and 300 sesterces to every Roman citizen. His funeral drew immense mourning. A pyre was erected near his daughter Julia's tomb on the Campus Martius, with a gilded shrine modeled on Venus Genetrix's temple, containing an ivory bed draped in purple and gold. A blood-stained garment worn during his assassination topped a trophy. The procession was so great that people carried funeral offerings unordered from the city to the Campus Martius. Plays at his funeral included a moving passage from Pacuvius's Trial for Arms. That ever I, unhappy man, should save wretches, who thus have brought me to the grave. Lines from Attilius's Electra also echoed the theme. Instead of a traditional eulogy, Consul Antony had a herald proclaim Senate decrees granting Caesar divine and human honors, along with their oath to defend his person, adding only brief words himself. Former magistrates carried the bier from the rostra into the forum. Debate arose whether to burn the body at Jupiter's temple or Pompey's Senate house when suddenly 2 armed men ignited the pyre. The crowd added wood, tribunes and benches, and whatever was to hand. Musicians and actors tore costumes from his triumphal wardrobe and threw them in flames. Veteran legionaries cast their armor into the fire. Many women joined, discarding jewelry, bully, and children's cloaks. Mourning foreigners gathered, especially Jews who kept vigil for nights near the pyre. The enraged crowd sought Brutus and Cassius's homes but was repelled. Mistakenly killing Helvia Cinna, unrelated to the conspirators and caught by chance, they paraded his severed head on a spear. They later erected a marble column in the forum inscribed, "To the father of his country." This site hosted sacrifices, vows, and oaths sworn by Caesar's name. Some friends suspected Caesar welcomed death due to failing health, ignoring omens and warnings. Others believed his Senate security led him to dismiss his Spanish guards with drawn swords. Another view is he chose to face danger head-on rather than live in constant fear. He reportedly said the Republic cared more for his safety than he did, for he was satiated with power and glory, but the Republic, if he fell, would be plunged into deeper civil war. It was generally believed Caesar's death was as he wished. Inspired by Xenophon's account of Cyrus's last wishes, he preferred a swift death to lingering illness. On his final night at Lepidus's house, when discussing ways to die, he favored sudden, unexpected death. Caesar died at 56, swiftly deified by Senate decree and popular belief. A comet appeared for 7 days during Games Augustus held in his memory, thought to be Caesar's soul ascending to heaven. Hence, statues depict him with a star on his brow. The Senate closed the house where he was killed, decreed the Ides of March parricidal, and forbade assembly on that day thereafter. Most conspirators died within 3 years, few surviving naturally. The Senate condemned them. Many perished by accident, battle, or suicide with the same dagger used on Caesar. The Civil War's end marked a turning point in Roman history. A republic glorious for 4.5 centuries fell into despotism, never to emerge. The sudden shift without foreign invasion suggests the republic's political health had long weakened. Though the Romans expelled Tarquin and abolished the monarchy, they preserved religious institutions set by their second king, Numa Pompilius, giving priesthood and its power to the aristocracy. This curbed popular volatility and bolstered Senate supremacy. Tribunes, created later, held power that often caused civil strife, enabling ambitious men who bought their favor to dominate. Most tribunes aimed to protect the people over individuals, causing unrest but not permanent tyranny. Morality is vital to political stability. With Rome's growing size, strict regulation was needed to prevent decay encouraged by large urban centers. By 312 AUC, magistrates oversaw population and property censuses and punished misconduct. Civil and religious laws joined to maintain order, with Romans' frugal lifestyle guarding against destructive vices. By Caesar's era, public liberties' defenses weakened. Reverence for the constitution waned after usurpations by Marius and Sulla. Religious fear no longer governed conscience. Public shame declined amid widespread corruption. An eminent contemporary historian noted rampant venality. A later writer blamed luxury and debt for civil unrest and acceptance of war. The monstrous Catalan conspiracy, involving Rome's elite, sought to destroy the Senate, seize wealth, and burn Rome. Causes included luxury, irreligion, and personal excess. Caesar's early death suggests his eagerness for Gaul was financially motivated. In Gaul, he amassed vast wealth, becoming the richest in Rome. If mere wealth were his goal, he had reached it. But his continued aggrandizement reveals boundless ambition. He planned a new forum costing £800,000, raised legions at personal expense, and promised unprecedented public games. These signal a quest for popularity and control. Pompey reportedly said Caesar, unable to fulfill promises, wished to sow disorder. Cicero's view was that Caesar sought chimerical glory. Neither Cicero nor Pompey suspected Caesar feared prosecution if he retired. Yet Domitius declared Caesar faced impeachment for undermining the Republic. Low as Caesar's morals were, he allegedly bribed Curio with nearly £500,000 at the Civil War start. Whatever his motives, Caesar's rebellion was perilous. Pompey's delays, withdrawal from Italy, and failure to exploit victories likely cost the Republic a chance to survive. Pharsalia's plains saw Caesar's victory, unexpected and decisive. No longer subject to the Senate or law, he overcame enemies and the constitution alike. It is to Caesar's credit that once he obtained supreme power, he ruled with a moderation few who had sided with the Republic expected. His private life, both before and after this period, is scarcely recorded. From then on, he appears to have lived mainly in Rome, near which he owned a small villa on a hill with a beautiful view. His time was almost wholly devoted to public affairs. Though he employed many agents, he did not seem to have any official minister. Caesar was generally accessible, though Cicero once complained in a letter about waiting long among a crowd before an audience. Despite Caesar's high rank, he maintained social reciprocity, returning visits and dining as guest in others' homes. At the table and with wine he was moderate. Yet, all his dangers, fatigue, and ceaseless worry in pursuit of absolute power brought him no happiness. His health declined. His former cheerfulness faded, though not his greatness of spirit. His fate stands as a memorable example of a brilliant talent undone by unchecked ambition, to the ruin of himself and his country.